I think the most encouraging thing about what we've seen so far is really what Fabian Holland has brought to that forward pack.
Also, the fact that the second half was messy, and so that's the last 40 minutes we played. We might have been absolutely brilliant up until half-time, but it was 14-all in that second half.
There will be a temptation to maybe start Ratima and Damian McKenzie together
that combination,
in front of their home crowd.
DSPN, the Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Time for the full PMA of that test match performance in Wellington. Tony Johnson joins us from Sky Sport. Tony was in Fiji calling Fiji versus Scotland on the weekend, so we're going to talk about all of that as well. We'll talk about the box, the innovation, or is it what the hell's going on there? Lions versus a cobbled together side, which was an embarrassment of a game. But the best rugby, I think, out of any test match on the weekend, Japan won. Wales beat Japan as well. We've got to remember that. Was the 10th to the 40th minute of that first half in Wellington, and you said last week that you were on song with what they were trying to do and what Scott Robertson, the way that we're trying to attack, the attitude of the players, the game plan and so forth. Well, when it works and when it's swinging like that for that 10th to 40th minute, second half for me got a bit messy. It was always going to when you've won a game at half time, right? But 29-3 in that period where we were pouring it on, man, if we can produce that against the Springboks and other opponents, that's glorious to watch, Tony.
Yeah, I think we saw a step up in the efficiency of the team. Those little percentages that we talked about last week, that they'd be looking for 3, 4, 5% improvement across the board in all aspects. We saw those, but we also did see a bit of innovation, particularly the Cam Roigard try, the one round the front of the line out. That's a move that they'd cooked up. Apparently Bryn Evans had a bit to do with that. So we saw...
I just wonder whether we should have saved that one for September, but never mind.
No, you've got to work. You've got to see if they work. The basics were there. I think there was a period, as you say, in the second half where, again, it got a bit frantic and maybe a little bit muddled. But by and large, this was the step forward that they needed after what was not an altogether convincing win over the French in the first test. And a much-changed French team, I guess you have to put it into some sort of context that this is not their strongest team. They made a whole bunch of changes, but that's their problem. If they want to treat it like a developmental exercise, well, then that's their problem.
We can't play for them, so we've just got to look at who's in front of us and go out and play as well as we possibly can.
And they did that, and there's some really encouraging things to come out of it, Martin, which I guess we can go through bit by bit.
The floor's yours.
Well, the first thing I'd say is I know there's been a lot of talk about some of the brilliant backline play and how Artie's playing and all that sort of thing, and he was. But to me, I think the most encouraging thing about what we've seen so far is really what Fabian Holland has brought to that forward pack. A big man. Now, I guess when he came to New Zealand, a bit of a blank canvas when you think you're not coming from a country where they have a great rugby pedigree by any means, but a great sporting pedigree. Mm-hmm. You think about the great football players that they've had, the cyclists,
tennis
the athletes, the tennis players, the Formula One drivers.
Yep.
So built for the game, but also with a really good processor. And you can see that every single game he plays, he is more and more impressive. He spooked the French line out. That's another thing that we saw a development from him. Obviously, in the first test, he won all his line-out ball. He made those tackles. He's got a phenomenal work rate, this guy. But then he got up and he attacked the French line-out, and they started thinking, where are we going to throw this? So that is great. The knock-on effect of that is that Tupou Vaa'i moves to the side of the scrum.
And that's working.
And vindication, I think, in this test match of the selection policy of sticking by and large, apart from a couple of injury-enforced changes, sticking with the team that played the first test. What would have been gained by making changes to the second test?
Yep.
Give those guys another chance, and it came off. And we saw Tupou Vaa'i really starting to grow in that number 6 jersey. I think that could well be a permanent move.
I think that we're looking at that against South Africa.
Well, when you think that,
and he won't play this weekend, remember that.
No, because he took that accidental head knock. But remember, Scott Barrett wasn't playing, and I thought Paddy Tuipulotu.
I thought he was great, wasn't he?
Absolutely, he gave them everything that you need from that role. He won his lineouts too, but he carried the ball really well. So you're going to have Barrett, you're going to have Tuipulotu, you're going to have Holland, and when he comes back, you're going to have Sam Darry, which means that gives you the luxury of really working on Tupou Vaa'i as an international number 6.
Yep.
With a guy like Finau coming off the bench, if you want the big guy, or maybe a different kind of player,
Remember,
a smaller player.
Satiti's still injured as well, so we
Satiti's
don't
still
have
in the mix.
him there. Yep.
So that, to me, that was one
we're
of the
building
most...
some big depth here, aren't we? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, most encouraging thing. The way that Fabian Holland has so quickly found his way in Test rugby, and the ceiling that this guy has got is immense, but also the side effect that it's had of giving the All Blacks, through having Vaa'i at 6, a much more balanced look to their loose forward trio. The type 5 have gone well when you consider that.
Can I just put a word in here for Codie Taylor, who I think is playing some of his best rugby that I've seen, Tony. And the only worry I have with that is I think he's now up here in terms of our hookers, and the next guys are down here. Like, this is a position where I thought we had a lot of guys, but he's actually so much better at the moment than the rest, isn't he?
He and Ardie Savia led the way. The leaders of that forward pack, they were both quite outstanding. And I love what captaincy does for... I mean, he's a terrific player at the best of times, but you can see he wears that mantle of captaincy really well. He thrives on it, which is food for thought down the track. But Codie Taylor, essentially, he's a captain of the team as well.
For sure.
And they led the way. But
well, we were combative, weren't we? And Scott Robertson said this, and Jason Ryan said this to us during the week as well, that they wanted more from that area. Just so you wanted more front foot stuff, just, as you say, these percentages, but just extra aggression, extra speed coming off the line, hitting the contact harder, all of these things. They demanded it, they got it. And that is why we put them away over those 30-minute period of that half. I mean, we put them away because we had all that ball.
You can't do all that backline stuff we love to see in New Zealand, the intricate loop arounds and the cutout passes and the quick transfers of the ball, unless you've got a platform.
Yeah, that's the most basic thing in Test rugby, isn't it?
Totally. It is, and that's encouraging when you consider that, as I say, Satiti has been out with injury, and no Scott Barrett in that test. The frontline props, Tamati Williams, Tyrell Lomax, due to come back later on, and Sam Darry, who eventually will come back, and just got to hope that he stays healthy. So in terms of expanding the depth of the team, this has been a really good exercise. They've got to follow it up now, because I'm sure that the French will be thinking, we've got to come back to France with something to show for our trip down here. And I suspect that Galtier will look at the 2 tests, pick the best, because he did change a lot for the second test.
For sure.
He'll pick what he thinks is his best team on the field.
He'll go out to win this third test.
And try and get something out of this.
Absolutely.
In anticipation, maybe, of the All Blacks making changes.
Making some changes, Look, there's 3 guys, McAllister, Love and Hotham, who haven't played. You expect to see, I'd say, McAllister on his home track. I wouldn't be surprised to see some other changes. I wouldn't be surprised to see McKenzie start, for example, at number 10 perhaps. But then again, your argument is solid in terms of we've beaten them twice and we put a gap between our 2 teams in that particular test. Why wouldn't you go again?
Well, I think there will be an inclination to make some changes. I don't think they'll be sweeping as such, but you mentioned 3 players there, but don't forget Anton Leonard-Brown's likely to come back into the mix for this one as well, after that broken collarbone.
He's back.
And I'm not sure what the status is of Jacobson at this point.
No, we heard today that he's actually okay to go.
If he's okay to go, well, then I think they'll look to maybe bring him in for Christian Leo-Willie, who's done a really good job, but maybe change that up. There will be a temptation to maybe start Ratima and Damian McKenzie together in front of their home crowd, and especially if Anton Leonard-Brown comes back into the mix.
And Tupaia.
And Quinn Tupaya's there as well. So they've certainly got options. When I first thought about it, I thought they're more likely to make changes via the bench, bring these guys in via the bench. But who knows? If he starts McKenzie at 10, well then what about Reuben Love at fullback?
Yeah, you might. I mean,
so Reuben Love, they have to give him an opportunity, surely. Noah Hotham as well. One of the halfbacks will drop out of the mix. Maybe they'll choose to give Roigard a break. I mean, he has been phenomenal. He's a bit like Codie Taylor. He's so clearly
so far ahead of the rest at the moment,
best number 9.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you give someone else the responsibility of starting. Do you take the risk of having your number 3 coming off the bench, or do you go, no, maybe we need Roigard in case things start going a bit screwed?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're bold, that's probably what you do.
Yeah, but you've got the luxury of being 2 up as well, right? So
and the Dave Gallagher Trophy has been secured. That would have been good. But I think they'll want to finish the job off in Hamilton. I think they'll want to sweep it and set a really good platform for what lies ahead.
There's also the fact that the second half was messy, and so that's the last 40 minutes we played. We might have been absolutely brilliant up until half time, but it was 14 all in that second half. So this is, again, maybe they go, well, hang on, lads, you got to improve upon that. So we want that same team to be put out there again to do a better job in the next 40 minutes than you did in that 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Who knows? We've got a luxury in front of us now, haven't we?
Yeah, well, 14 points is still better than some of the second half performances last year.
Sure, but it's hard
right.
to get the cohesion, Tony. I mean, rugby can disintegrate, and there's a couple of silly things. The mistakes happen, and subs come on, and before you know it, all of that, and it's very difficult when you've had a great first half to replicate it. I think we were all crying out at home for 50 points. I wanted to see 50 points.
Yeah,
it didn't come up. So
yeah, and
they'll
look at that too. They'll say that bit needs further improvement.
Encouraging though, isn't it? And exciting though, isn't it? Like when you look at that, and you watched it in Fiji, which is a different experience. And this is the other thing. Tony watched that game with the refereeing crew from the Scotland-Fiji test.
Yeah.
And so they're looking at that game through lenses that you and me don't look at a game
It was
through.
a really interesting experience, I'd have to say. And it was enjoyable too, to come back, and hopefully we can talk about it later on, because I had the privilege of calling a really great game of rugby.
Yeah, it was, but we didn't get to see it here in New Zealand, unfortunately.
That's a real shame, because it was a terrific... You
Watch
can
it
get the
YouTube.
highlights on YouTube.
Yeah, and it's good. Honestly, if you take the time today, go and have a look at them. They're bloody good highlights.
But then to sit
Fiji
back
were excellent.
and watch the test match with people who know the laws of the game inside and out. It was a really different way of looking at it. But no, thoroughly enjoyed watching the game. And as I say, I think they've achieved what they've needed to achieve to this point. Now, they talked about being bold. It's how bold are they prepared to be in terms of their selection? But the most important thing, it's about maintaining the level and building on that, because, as I said to you last week, none of the things that went wrong weren't fixable.
Right.
They nothing.
And you said you saw enough signs there that if we fix them, we'll then...
Yeah, exactly. Nothing sort of fundamentally deep-rooted issues that aren't going to go away without changes. So I think they'll try and build on that, finish the series on a good, positive note. But bear in mind that this is France. They'll be in a gnarly sort of a mood. They'll want something to show for the tour.
Steel day to day.
He will pick the strongest team that he can, with a view to getting something positive at the end of their season, and to go back to and having, therefore, being able to say we've actually built our depth.
All right. I gave it a C+ first test. I gave it a B that second test. Your ranking is what?
Oh, I'd say definitely. I'd say probably, taking into account what happened in the second half, probably an A-, maybe a B+, something around that area. Look, I don't want to be negative. Don't want to pour cold water on it by talking too much about the quality of the French team or what they've brought here. The fact that there were a few niggly bits in the second half. Some of the kickoff receptions weren't great. Little things like that. So, probably a B+, but it's a pretty good B+, if you know what I mean.
DSPN.